specific to get my graduate degree. And when I graduated, the guy that I was dating at the time said there's this adult ed program that's opening up in the area, and they're looking for someone to run the school. And they're going to be students from the state hospital. And they'll be anywhere from 23 to 60 something years old. And I said, okay, I'll apply for it. And I went down on a Friday. They hired me immediately. And they put me, the students arrived on a little school bus, and I was by myself on on Monday, excuse me. And they gave me a stack of paper and 12 pencils, because there were 12 students, and that's all I had.
Oh, that sounds familiar, like the old special ed stories too.
Yeah.
I had a puppet theater, that's what I got. No books, no nothing, no puppet theater, puppet theater. Wow.
And of course, back then, a lot of the students were in a fetal position in some cases. You know, they would come in and sit on the chair and put their head on the table and cross their legs, and they had been taught almost nothing. And there was no language, nothing. And back then, when I was trained, we didn't know about verbal behavior. I wasn't taught about that. I wasn't even taught about any of Skinner's work, which was ridiculous. Everyone was in the journals. And you'd look up in a journal based on what you wanted to weaken whatever repertoire it was. You would read that article and find out what procedure you should be using, which was ridiculous. So I just started, I asked them, please, do you have old books up there that I can bring down here? And they can't read, but they've got a pencil and maybe they can draw on the book. You know, can I do anything, you know, like that? So, and there was a park across the street, and the only thing I had in my car were my golf clubs and a football, because I was a football fanatic. And I thought, well, I won't get out my golf clubs. That might be too dangerous. So we played a lot of football. And I had learned enough about the idea of getting them to participate doing something that I would only let them work so long. And I'd say, stop, you gotta stop now. It's time to go outside and do something. And they go, oh, no, over time. You know, it was like I developed that repertoire so well that even though they were doing foolish kinds of things at that time, we would go outside and we'd play pass the football, so to speak, you know, and go into the library maybe to look at something, because it was on that campus. And Rick, who was running, not you, Rick, but another Rick, who was running the adult ed program, said, if you have any of your students that are capable of coming up here, they can take our courses, some of our courses. And I thought, oh my goodness, how do I prepare them to get ready to go up to the adult ed program? And so that's the whole idea of the competent learner repertoire started to evolve. And I was able to isolate them. Because I didn't know about verbal behavior, I made up my own descriptions of the repertoires. And so eventually I was able to hire additional staff, and I ended up with 40-something students, and they actually built a building for us in that town. And I was in our wing was the school wing, so to speak, and then there was elderly people that were in another wing, and so they helped me. And I was able to hire more and more staff. And then I learned about direct instruction curricula. And so I started using that with the more advanced students. And then a very good friend of mine, who's actually, his name is on the curriculum, ended up working with me, and she had the background from Western Michigan with Dr. Jack Michael about verbal behavior. And then that all of a sudden came into the development of the repertoires. Is how that all evolved. And it was an amazing experience for me. I spent 9 years there developing the competent learner repertoire assessment. I didn't have a curriculum at that time. I just had the CLRA is all. I don't know how familiar most of you are with that, but it was a very useful assessment. And so I had the fortune to meet with Ziggy for an entire day. And I learned from him that he had not been able to develop a curriculum to get kids ready for language for learning. And of course, I'm one of those people that says, I'll do it. It took me 8 years to develop it. That's probably the best thing I did. And once I did that, I realized from what he told me, he said, don't ever let anyone have access to your materials unless they have mastery of your program. He said, I made that mistake. I let Language for Learning out on the market and sold it. They promised me that they would always train people, but they didn't. So that's when the competency-based programming became a very firm part of the way I wanted to deliver things. And I had people very upset with me about that. You know, they always want to buy it, and we won't do that. It's not going to ever be released that way. And so I realized I had to develop the CLM units to teach people how to use the curriculum and the assessment tools, so forth and so on. And so that's how that came about. And after those 9 years, this was all in California, in the central part of California, up north a little bit. I was asked by a school district in Monterey County to come down there and start working with special ed kids. And I would go down twice a week for the longest time. I'd drive all the way down from where I was. And I started working in classrooms. And the first one I worked in, they had kids strapped in chairs at circle time. It was appalling. I just couldn't believe what was going on with that. Or they had kids that were so injurious that it was really amazing to me. I didn't have that problem with the adults that were released from the hospital. So I had a lot to learn, and I learned mostly from the paraprofessionals, because they were always the ones who were delivering programming of any sort with the children. The teacher was too busy trying to work with the more advanced kids. And so I realized that the course of study really had to be so-called teacher-friendly. I couldn't use speaker-listener for the verbal behavior. I had to use talker, observer, so forth and so on, to talk about the repertoires. But I'm still developing, as I said, the units. There's still a lot more to be done, but that's basically how it all evolved. It was for my own survival and the survival of the learners and the educators that I was working with. And of course now we do work with parents also through my business. So, does that help?
Yes, very good. Thank you. I think it's important.